Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. Again, I'll introduce myself. I'm Elvin, head of the Global Adaptation Network at UN Environment Program. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you all to today's side event, integrating freshwater in NDCs and the national adaptation plans. This side event is, of course, happening at the margins of COP28, Health, Peace and Relief Day. We've seen water and adaptation being such a key issue at the COP so far. We started off day one of COP28 with the operationalization of the loss and damage fund by the COP28 presidency and parties over here. Water being such a key element to climate-related impacts, but also for adaptation as well. So that sends a very strong signal in terms of climate adaptation, and particularly around water being the center focus for raising ambition. Particularly for the national adaptation plans, I know that as countries are developing their adaptation plans, water is a key sector of focus. From the UNEP Adaptation Gap Report, at least I can say that agriculture, water, ecosystems, they are a central pillar of national adaptation plans and also to raise ambition. We also find from the Adaptation Gap Report that particularly adaptation actions in these key sectors, they are underinvested, and there is a need to raise ambition in these key critical sectors. And a key way to raise ambition is to mobilize support, particularly financial support for this. A key pillar to support ambition. A key pillar to supporting ambition in water-related sector is enhanced planning, particularly that around NDCs and national adaptation plans. Many countries, coming out of the NEP discussions that are happening, countries would like to have NEPs formulated and invested, and in fact the SG has given a timeline of by 2025 countries having access funds to formulate and support implementation of NEPs. So NEPs, being a key pillar, but also at the same time NDCs are being revised. So with this in mind, today's session will focus largely on how different ways freshwater can contribute to NDCs and NEPs, and we will hear from a range of panelists around good practices, examples of how countries have successfully included water in national climate change policies and in planning processes, but at the same time how implementation is being accelerated. Water, of course, cuts across many different sectors, and today being the health, peace, relief thematic pillar of COP, we know that water-related disasters cause water contamination, but also at the same time accelerate health-related incidents. At the same time, to less water in the form of water scarcity and drought can also be a contributor towards health-related impacts. So we'd like to hear from our panelists today on this. And I would now like to invite Danielle Frank, who is an Indigenous youth water defender and a board member to Rios to Rivers, to start with this conversation. We will focus on ingredients for watering the NDCs and NEPs. And Daniel, if you can talk about why do you think water isn't currently at the heart of NDCs and NEPs, and what are the barriers and what will it take to remove these barriers? So. Danielle is not here, okay. All right, I'm sorry. Professor Nishant, we will go on to you, and maybe you can tackle this question as well, which gives you about good 5 to 7 minutes, and perhaps you can talk more around the opportunities. We are missing when water is not included, and what harm is being done. And noting that you also come from Bangladesh, maybe you can also share some good practices and examples. So over to you, Professor Nishan.
I think I can say good afternoon. It's 5 minutes past 12, so it's no longer a morning. Okay. So good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And I feel honored to be invited to talk here. I would give 2-3 sentences about me. The NAP document that has been prepared by Bangladesh, I was the team leader. And the NDC document, there was a 4-member panel, and I was one of the 4. But before that, when UN Water was set up in 2002, I think, UN had a committee called Committee on Energy and Natural Resources for Development, CENRD. And later on, that committee was disbanded or not renewed, and separate unit under under UN was set up. And incidentally, I was the last chairman of that particular committee. So I know what are the areas where there is serious reservation at the global level, and why water is not a major subject at the global level. In 1977, the first global summit was held in Mar del Plata. And the program that was supposed to be held in 1997, 20 years after the first one, could not be held because there were certain countries had reservation, and 2 units were formed. One was Water Council and the other one is Water Commission. Anyway, so they keep, one group is doing an annual event every year in Sweden. The other one would do the Global Water Council meeting every 3 years. The reason I'm saying it, we tried, I have been part of the Bangladesh negotiation team for 15, 17 years, I forgot how many. And many times we wanted to raise water as a thematic issue. We failed. About 7-8 years back, it was, we wanted to raise 2 issues. One was agriculture, the other was food. And finally, the task was given to Substar, I think, or SBI. Lots of discussions were held, and it was agreed that we should have a global meeting to scope out on what we want to discuss. You understand, transboundary water management is a thing. The moment you utter, there are certain countries who would raise the red flag. Agriculture became a subject, but water is still not mainstreamed in climate change domain. Having said that, the first global agreement how to handle climate change was the UNFCCC. And it had 3 goals clearly stated. One, we should like to control the rise of temperature in a manner so that the ecosystems do not suffer. Second, global goal has been set up that we ensure food security all over the world. And third, the process of sustainable development is not challenged. So the SDG 6 comes under the umbrella recommendation. Having said that, water, in various global meetings, we talk about water supply and sanitation, we talk about overall water management, but climate change is water change. Water cycle is changing, availability is changing. Bangladesh is a land of water. We have the 2 largest of the top 5 rivers, we have 2. But would you believe in monsoon, we would have 2,000, 3,000 millimeters of rainfall. This year and the previous year, 2022, we did not have rainfall in the monsoon. And would you believe in a country which is supposed to be flooded under waist deep water, we had to pump groundwater to cultivate the crops. That is the change in water availability. It's a big issue. Floods are happening all of a sudden in a particular area, and the cities are very vulnerable because we are experiencing short duration, heavy rainfall. Dhaka, 60% of our capital would go under in a normal, say 50 to 100 millimeters of rainfall, but our National Adaptation Plan has projected we should be ready for 300 millimeters of rainfall in a day. So the Bangladesh NAP I would like to introduce a little bit. It is based on top-down, so had meetings with the experts, KIII, FGD, university professors, bottom-up. The country has 10 divisions, so we went to each division and we went to the remote village. So we talked to the elected person in the administration, talked to the government administrator, talked to the students, talked to business community. In total, I think we had more than 1,000 consultation. And we had given huge importance to this consultation. And then we had the middle of the road, top down and bottom up, and the middle are the professionals in the various departments. They have very good understanding on their own topic. But then my job was to kind of put them in an interdisciplinary manner. So very rightly, the Mr. Moderator has said that waterborne diseases are big issue because the hydrologic cycle is changing. If the hydrologic cycle changes, in Bangladesh we have 6 distinct seasons, of which 2 are, we find it, they are missing. One is spring. And one of our famous poet wrote a poetry, it says, whether the flowers bloom or not, I don't care. I will call it spring. Because the flowering time is changing. The movement of insects are changing. Pollination process is being affected. So you have flood, you have drought, side by side. And you don't know whether your village would suffer from flood or it will suffer from drought. We live with flood, therefore we have the protective measures, we call it embankment. And we have our own, the meaning of our own embankment is which is linear. And an embankment circles an area, we call it polder. In Netherlands, they use polder for both the situation. And we have another word called levee, not used much, but dike we use frequently. Anything on the coastal front is dike. And Bangladesh can suffer from storm surge height of 5 and higher meter. So the entire coastal belt is protected with 5-meter high dike. We are upgrading it to 6.5. But we are now pushing the government to have cyclone shelters next to the polders because that may fail or overtop. But the worst problem that we are facing is sea level rise. And sea level rise is pushing saline water from inland, and the southernmost districts, or we call it sub-districts, people are living. Bangladesh is a very high population, 170 million in a small area. And of that, in the coastal belt, which used to grow a lot of food, rice, shrimp, fish, the system is changing because salinity is moving in. So a freshwater ecosystem has become a saline front, and what do you do? When I was lecturing similarly in a situation in Bangladesh, he said, how far the salinity has moved? Our Prime Minister's constituency is in the middle of the country. I said, it has moved up to the central part, the Prime Minister's constituency. And somebody asked me, why are you flagging up it? I said, if the Prime Minister understands his constituency is going to go underwater, I'm sure he will take action. Now, Bangladesh is taking serious steps. We produce a tiny amount of carbon dioxide, and therefore mitigation is not our goal. We produce 0.3% global emission. The Prime Minister has instructed us that we should go for mitigation as much as we can go to show others that being a poor country, we are still an LDC, and we want to graduate from LDC position to lower middle income country in 2027, and our target to move from lower middle income to middle income country by 2041. So we are moving in that direction, and we find that climate change is going to be a major block. So having said that, I will just take 2-3 minutes and quickly shut up. One is we have set up 6 goals. So the goal number 1 is protect the actions or areas against climate variability. Now, we all say climate change, but we mean climate variability. Luckily, in Bangla, my mother tongue, we have 2 different words. One is that describes the long-term situation, which is climate, and short-term 3 days, 5 days, or maybe 1 day that we call abha, which is possibly that's an Arabic word, the short-term changes. So we have to be prepared for them, and then we should pay attention to food security, pay attention to agriculture. The 5 types of crops that we need, I just mentioned, flood-tolerant, drought-tolerant, heat-tolerant, salinity-tolerant, and the feed variety that we need is a shorter duration. We now have the rice that needs, we have 3 different times of rice, each is different. So normally they would take 120 days. We now need 70, 80 days. But problem is the research has not gone to the field. The time taken for the farmers to adopt the research result is a little bit long. So we are pushing the government on that. I'm an academic, but I work closely with the government. I have no position, no chair, no cap, anything. But somehow I find my way and tell the government this is what you should do. And I'm grateful to them that listen to me. We should have climate resilient infrastructure. We have built a road and small culverts, but then after 2 years we find the culvert has been washed away because we didn't estimate the flow of water correctly. And we want to integrate the climate change adaptation into the normal development process. And the 6th one is build capacity, transformative capacity. In Bangladesh, being a least developed country, each ministry or each government department works as a silo. There is no horizontal connection, neither at the ground level nor at the middle level. But we are arguing climate actions on climate change is not the job of the climate change ministry. They are going to advise, they are going to guide. But the ministry responsible for this particular activity, like health ministry should take care of the health-related issue. In the coastal belt, as the salinity has gone up, women are suffering significantly because if you live in a saline environment, your reproductive health is going to be difficult. So we have established good monitoring system. Now we are trying to push the government to move with us. Being an academic, we are a little bit advanced than our government, which our government accepts. Maybe we are a little bit behind the global thinking, but we have good representation in IPCC. We have good representation in the COPs. So we are taking note of the global thinking, going back, advising the government, this is the global thinking. But in the process, I feel local knowledge, folk wisdom, traditional knowledge have a big role to play. So we have what the farmers should do 50 years earlier or 100 years earlier, that we are trying to collect because that would give us good solution. I think I have taken more time. Mr. Facilitator is being very polite. He is not showing a red flag to me, but I will be here to answer to any question if you have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Nishant. And of course, my apologies. I should have introduced him because I was more focused on the run of the show. Professor Nishant works at the Center for Climate Change in Environmental University at the Breck University. Colleagues, I think, what I took from Professor Nishant's experience in Bangladesh, I think the opportunity being being able to work from a systems perspective, given that water is connected to a hydrological cycle, I think the message that I take is the best practices around here, particularly around crops, the different types of drought, flood, heat resilient crops. But in addition to that, the soft kind of measures in terms of leadership from the highest level, particularly using leadership to mobilize multidisciplinary actions. For me, that kind of stands out. I will now turn on to my next panelist, and We're very fortunate to have Valerie Hickey from the World Bank. Valerie is the Global Director of Environment and Natural Resources and Blue Economy. Valerie, so we do now see a surge in terms of water being a key sector in NDCs and NEPs. From you, what we'd like to hear is what role and potential do you see for freshwater, nature-based solutions in the NDCs and NEPs? And we are talking since from an institutional perspective and country perspective, maybe you could also highlight how World Bank is also supporting these approaches, particularly for countries. I'm more than happy for you to sit and talk from there, but either way is fine.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it works. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Elwyn, for inviting me. I want to make 5 quick points, and I want to step back a little bit as I make them. And I do want to congratulate Bangladesh, by the way, because Bangladesh has shown the way on disaster risk management more than any other country. And the story of climate change is a story of water, and the story of disaster risk management is a story of Bangladesh. And I think that's a story we should all learn. But the first point I want to make is all about the fact that we need to redefine success in this discussion. Not just here in this room, but in the COP. We spend much too much time talking about plans. Plans are great, but all plans are is a piece of paper on somebody's desk or on somebody's computer. And so as we talk about the importance of water in NAPs, that's a means, not an end. And we have to make sure we're redefining success to be about how do we manage water resources better and the use of that water, not whether or not it's in a plan. And I think it's really important that we do redefine success and are clear about it. And that as we redefine success, we remember that the plan itself is a means, but the plan is not just a product. What will make water in a plan work is the process around that plan. Whether there is ownership of all of the different stakeholders that are involved in water, that own the water, that use the water, that live next to the water. So when we think about plans, we need to remember they're a means to an end, and the process around creating that plan is more important than the plan as a product. The second point I wanted to make is to point to this board here and say, job done. We need to take yes for an answer. Everybody agrees water is important. Water is in every kind of plan and product out there, in every kind of a partnership. Elwyn, you said, and rightly so, that you need water in a plan such as a NAP or an NDC in order to get funding. Well, I guarantee you there are so many plans and products and partnerships that include water that if you need something to hook to, it's there. So again, I think sometimes we're worrying about the wrong thing. We need to take yes for an answer. I think at this COP and elsewhere, everybody knows climate change is a story of water. But one of the challenges, and this is my third point, that we haven't necessarily been able to move beyond water in the plan, is that we haven't been very good about data. Like many conversations at COP, they are science-driven, and that is absolutely important. But too often, the science does not manage the data well. When it comes to freshwater, there's lots of data. Again, all of these partners on the wall, and these are just, if you'll forgive the pun, a drop in the bucket of groups who are working on water. They're all collecting data, producing data. But is that data available? I don't know. Where is it? I don't know. And even if you find where the data is, even if it's not just sitting on the shelf of somebody's office, even if it is available on a website, often it's not accessible. The IPCC is full of some of the best minds of our generation doing some of the most important science. And when they produce their reports, they are absolutely unintelligible. Even the policy summary that's provided to decision makers, I'm somebody who has a PhD in this stuff, who's been working in this environment 25 years. Even the policy summary, which is supposedly the dumbed down version of the science, is impossible to understand. So even though the data is available, it's not accessible. How can you use data for decision making if you don't understand what it's saying? It's not affordable. We're spending too much money collecting too much data to a finer and finer point, when data should be about decision making, and as such it has to be affordable and it has to be credible. We have to know who's producing the data. Are these people we can trust? Is it replicable? So we have to do data better, because putting data in a plan is fine, but that data has to be available, accessible, affordable, and credible. But like I said, so much of the conversation around COP and around water, but every other decision is about the science. We got to get the data better. But it stops at science. It's as if only people understood a little bit more, they'd do the right thing. Does anybody in this room smoke? No? Okay, that's good. Does anybody take a vitamin tablet? Okay, someone in this COP smokes. I guarantee you, I've seen people smoke. And it's not because they don't know smoking is bad for them. People are not acting on saving freshwater because they don't know freshwater is important. It's because there is a political economy around freshwater that is more sensitive probably than any other political economy. The political economy around energy is difficult. The political economy around water is exponentially more complex, because water is existential. Water is power. So we cannot stop at science alone. We have to move to the political economy. We have to grapple with it. And we have to be honest about what's possible and not always focus on what the data tells us we should do. That's nice, what we should do. We have to talk about what we can do. And then finally, I just want to make one point about nature-based solutions, because this is a term that's used a lot. It's increasingly turning up in plans and NAPs and NDCs. This is not a term that translates in any language. Even in English, nobody knows what it means. Please, can we find a new term and simplify and stop making everything about climate be so obtuse and inaccessible that we can't talk to regular people about it? Second, and this is a danger in nature-based solutions that at the World Bank we're really trying to fight against, nature-based solutions at times is adding to the global distrust. And we know there's a trust gap in these conversations at COP, because a lot of the work we do around nature-based solutions can sometimes just be a Trojan horse for conservation, instead of it actually being about adaptation and being able to show that it's having an adaptive impact. It's really just conservation, and we cross our fingers and hope for the best that it also provides adaptation. We have to be more honest about showing that nature-based solutions are not about nature. They're about people and their economic assets and protecting them. And finally, we have to remember, when we talk about water, whether it's in a plan as part of the process, whether about science or political economy, when we talk about nature-based solutions, we have to marry modern science to traditional practice. Because when it comes to water, we don't understand it fully. This is even more true in other nature-based solutions when it comes to ecosystem services. Ecosystem function is not something we fully understand. But people who have lived in landscapes, lived with ecosystem services, have instincts and practices built around their understanding, gathered over generations. So we have to marry that understanding, that instinct and that practice with modern science, and make sure that when we put terms like nature-based solutions, when we talk about water and plans, we recognize what we're actually saying, which is much more complex than we put it in a plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Valerie. Very good points around water, the need for data, but accessible data, one that's understood. But I liked your last point around making traditional knowledge and local knowledge as part of solutions. So, I come from small islands, from Fiji, and much of our knowledge around ecosystems is less about the services and more about the culture. And so when, of course, people talk about maximizing ecosystem services using nature-based solutions, like, well, this is how we practice the changes in seasons, or this is how we use our oceans and fisheries. So quite a key. Another thing that I take from your conversation is around making data, beyond data being accessible, water as a sector is now featuring across many plans. So how do we scale up the investments in these plans so that for people it means real actions? I think, those are some really good points. And of course, we look forward to the partnership with World Bank in terms of supporting approaches. I have been told that there is a little bit of a change in our schedule. I would like to invite our youth representative from Madagascar, Amir, to the panel. And what we will do is combine the two panels into one. And Amir is a youth representative from Madagascar, and he will be talking to the point of broader engagement in the water sector. Okay, thank you, colleagues, for that, and Valerie. I will now turn on to my next panelist, Emily Weeks. Emily is a senior policy advisor at USAID, and she works for the Bureau of Resilient Environment and Food Security. Sorry, that's a bit of a mouthful. Emily works at the USAID. So Emily, I would like to turn to you. The US recently released a new White House action plan and a whole of government global water strategy that would encourage integration and elevation of global water security to US efforts. So from this experience, what would meaningful inclusion of water and freshwater ecosystems in national planning, what does it look like? And perhaps from this side, I mean, what does a whole of a government approach to water management really looks like? If you could just demystify that in 5 minutes or 5 to 7 minutes. So over to you, Emily.
Okay, thank you, moderator. I thought I'd mix it up since we're all using different. I would try the headset. Seems very effective. So I work for USAID, and USAID, of course, is an international development agency, and our focus is working with our global country partners. So I'll speak on half of the work that we do internationally, not so much in regards to any domestic work we do in the United States. So as you mentioned, we do have a new water strategy that was developed to work across our programs that in our partner countries. And the purpose of that strategy is to work not across various areas within water, including sanitation, water resource management, water policy, and beyond. So I want to speak specifically trying to align it with the NDCs and NAPs. I sit in the Bureau for Resilience, Environment, and Food Security. It is a mouthful, but what is a kind of a milestone in regards to USAID is we've now brought together two key sectors, the environment and food security and the agriculture sector, which I'll speak to a little bit today as far as integration of water. As we're aware in relation to climate, agriculture is one of our key sectors as far as being able to address some of our climate challenges. Agriculture also is a key sector in regards to water management. So we have several programs that do work specifically in regards to water management in the agriculture sector, ensuring that we can help smallholder farmers in their management of water resources, particularly in the case of working in improved rain-fed farming systems and improved irrigation systems. In addition, we work, as I said, underneath the water strategy in policy, and I noticed as one of your key partners on your board here is EMI, and we have worked in collaboration with EMI on one key project that was in Southern Africa that is addressing some of the topics that the World Bank, my World Bank colleague here, brought up in regards to data and utilizing data for implementation. And interestingly, of course, in some of the countries that we work in, the access to data and the quality of data is very limited. So being able to work within our global data sets and be able to adapt and utilize models to help us improve water management within regions that do have very limited data is one of the key things that we try to provide as far as capacity development and analytical support. In the case of Southern Africa, working across cross-boundary water issues, of course, is another key area of which we need to address. As we all know, water doesn't have any boundaries, and we have to be able to manage water resources across boundaries. And in particular, this project was specifically looking at groundwater management, another area of which we have limited data and limited ability to develop policy and implement. In addition to policy and agricultural water management, we also address water in the context of health. And I do want to mention some of the countries that we're working in. I don't have Bangladesh as one of my examples, though admittedly, I think obviously Bangladesh is one of the key areas that we have lots of funding and support when it comes to water management and broader USAID work. What resonated with me in Bangladesh is I did live in Bangladesh as a small child, and the one thing that I do remember from Bangla is Pani Lakbe, and pronunciation may not be quite as accurate, but it resonated with me when you were mentioning how critical our learnings from Bangladesh are in regards to the impacts of climate change. And even when I was a child living in Bangladesh, there were key water management challenges that Bangladesh faced before some of the pertinent climate impacts that we're facing today. And so other examples that we have across our programs are within Nepal, where we work specifically under what is called our WASH program, providing $24 million of project funding for Feed the Future and biodiversity funding that supports water interventions around the management of resources. And again, I'm not a water management expert, but I'm representing USAID and highlighting some of these programs. And another area of which we've worked is in Guatemala, and specifically looking at agroforestry and coffee production, of which, again, combining some of the key critical areas that we need to address around biodiversity management and water resource management. And as far as building resilience, we have programs in Ethiopia that is addressing degradation of watersheds, particularly providing support across food and cash transfers and community-based public conservation programs and watershed and restoration activities. I wanted to bring in one of the key areas that you have highlighted here around NDCs and NAPs. And though we haven't fully navigated how we are going to be working within the NDCs and NAPs across the globe, we have established a program that's called the Comprehensive Action for Climate Change Initiative. And the main focus, it is cross-sectoral. And again, like I said, we're starting to begin work in regards to how we address the implementation of NDCs specific to water. But the focus of the program is again, what's highlighted today from my colleagues, is trying to take that data, trying to take the policies and the commitments that have been made, and work towards implementing those, providing the capacity support, providing the institutional infrastructure, and providing the private sector investment, mobilizing climate finance to be able to identify projects that specifically respond to the NDCs. And in this case, really highlighting the need to address the NDCs that have been set in regards to water. And again, reiterating the importance of addressing water in our climate challenge. As I said in the beginning, one of the key factors, one of the key areas that we work in is food security. And being able to meet our food challenges of the future, we do need to address our water challenges, and that is specifically being impacted by climate change. So again, as far as implementation of NDCs and NAPs, our key program currently at USAID is CASI, and establishing collaborative projects with both the public and private sector, and working with our research institutes to have evidence-based interventions that we can implement on the ground. So I think I'll stop there as far as giving you a broad overview of what we're doing at USAID. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions in regards to some of the specific work that we're doing.
So thank you, Emily. I mean, what I take from USAID's intervention is that a lot of your work is really focused around implementation of water-related targets in plans, particularly as NDCs are being scaled and NAPs are being developed, but also the fact how multi-stakeholder and new partnerships with private sector can help drive implementation of NDCs and NAPs. And I think that's what we are getting to now, while we've been talking a lot in terms of integrating water into the NDCs and NAPs. What I'm hearing from the panel is the strong urge, but also the ambition to actually implement many of the water-related plans, water-related targets within the plans and strategies. Of course, a key voice in terms of decision making for the implementation of NDCs and NAPs are the youths. The youth have been a strong voice at the COP28, bringing their diverse expertise to the table. And we will soon turn to Amir Saeed, who is a youth rep, to talk about this. I understand, Valerie, you would have to leave soon. So at this stage, can I welcome any one or two questions for Valerie? If there's an appetite for a question, a quick question for Valerie at this stage. No questions. Okay. Well, Valerie, before we release you, maybe in just top one or two sentences, what are the maybe one or two priorities in terms of supporting countries to, let's say, better implement their water plans, water strategies in their climate plans? You mentioned data, but beyond data.
Institutional strengthening. It's the governance agenda. And helping countries identify the whole of government governance that is often spread and dispersed in different sectors, as you were saying, Alwyn, and figuring out where that is, who has control over what pieces, and strengthening that. Too much capacity building traditionally that World Bank and other development partners have given is on individual excellence, making sure that water engineers or hydrologists are really well trained. We haven't given enough emphasis on institutional strengthening. We need to have that individual excellence be empowered through existing and strong institutions. So if there was one thing beyond data that we need to do better, it's institutional strengthening.
Thank you, Valerie, for that message. And I would like to thank you on behalf of the organizers, WWF US, Water Aid and FAO, for your presence. And I'm sure we'll be in touch with the follow-ups to this panel. Colleagues, I would like to now turn to Amir Saeed, who is from Think Green. And Amir, we've seen a very strong, growing voice from youths. I personally a big fan of the youth voice and youth empowerment and the champions who are here at COP28. And now would like to turn to you in terms of how can diverse voices, particularly those of youth, be more meaningfully included in the climate, water climate planning and implementation. So, Amir, over to you.
Bonjour à tous. Merci de m'avoir donné la parole.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for giving me the floor.
Je vais m'exprimer en français. Tout d'abord, je tenais à parler de 3 points. Quand je dis 3, c'est 3 sur 4 habitants de Madagascar qui ont accès à l'eau. C'est très important.
I will be speaking in French, and I would like to highlight 3 points. And first of all, I would like to say that 3 out of 4 people living in Madagascar have access to water.
Madagascar est le 3e pays qui a des difficultés à l'accès à l'eau dans le monde.
Madagascar is the 3rd country in the world who has difficulty to access water resources in the world.
Et aussi, Madagascar est le 3e pays, selon l'UNICEF, le plus impacté par le changement climatique.
And Madagascar, according to the UNICEF, is the 3rd country which is impacted by climate change.
Dans les pays en voie de développement, plus de la moitié de la population est constituée de jeunes et d'enfants. Et c'est cette population-là qui est impactée par ce changement climatique.
In the developing country, more than 50% of people is young people, and they are all affected by climate change.
Il est aujourd'hui essentiel de ne plus dire que de diversifier le water et tout ce qui est changement climatique parce que tout va de pair.
It is essential to not divide water and climate change today.
Nous, l'association de jeunes de Madagascar, AECA sur la désertification, le changement climatique et la biodiversité, nous avons une consultation nationale des jeunes sur les 24 régions de Madagascar.
We are representing Association of Youth of Madagascar, ICA, which is dedicated to the climate change and biodiversity, and we set up consultations, youth consultation in the 20, what is,
22 régions sur 24.
in the 22 regions among 24, out of 24 regions.
Il est aujourd'hui primordial, comme les précédents panélistes l'ont dit, d'avoir des données. Donc nous, on a essayé de rassembler toutes ces données sur le niveau Madagascar et avec des moyens, on va dire des moyens plutôt limités.
It is essential today to have access to data, and that's why we have gathered all data, but I have to say that we have limited resources.
Il n'est pas normal qu'aujourd'hui, un enfant ou un jeune ou même une personne n'ait pas accès à l'eau.
It's not normal that today young children or women don't have access to water.
Donc on a essayé d'organiser des réunions bilatérales avec les acteurs multisectoriels.
That's why we decided to organize bilateral organization with multi-sectorial representatives.
Afin de rapprocher tout ce qui est besoin en eau et les besoins essentiels de la vie à des populations dans les zones enclavées et dans les zones reculées de Madagascar.
In order to address needs in water in the very far region of Madagascar.
Aujourd'hui, il est plus important aussi de vérifier, est-ce que vraiment, de mettre en place un système de vérification des aides humanitaires ou des fonds qui sont réservés sur le water.
That's why it is important to put in place a system of humanitarian aid.
Et il est important aussi de savoir la réalité du terrain.
And to know the reality of the terrain.
Moi, aujourd'hui, je suis la passerelle entre les zones enclavées pour les jeunes et la population vulnérable vers les acteurs de développement, vers les acteurs qui veulent aider ces jeunes-là.
And me, I play intermediate role between this young generation and actors who are able to help them.
Je suis sûr qu'à travers une table, on peut trouver des solutions efficaces et qui seront mises en place très rapidement.
And I'm sure that we could find efficient solution and to set them up in a very short term.
Yes. Pour finir, quelques mots en anglais. I am Amir. I'm a youth delegate Madagascar. I'm a youth delegate for Africa. I'm a youth delegate of Earth. And I am a climate warrior. I am a water warrior. Thank you.
Thank you, Amir, and very well said. We need more water warriors like you, and I acknowledge, of course, the great initiative youth reps are supporting over here. Definitely, youth engagement is indispensable to ensure sustainability, but also preserving the rights of our future generation, including access to clean water and also resilient water resources as well. Movements like you are growing all over the world, and we welcome that in terms of the intergenerational, but also, as you mentioned, intersectoral knowledge exchange around practices. I have been told that we have an indigenous youth water defender, and I just want to check whether Danielle Frank is here in the crowd. No. Okay. Colleagues, what I would now do is we'll have an open session for about 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes for any questions that you have for our panelists. We have amongst us, of course, Emily, Professor Nishad, and also Amir. So over to you for any questions from the audience, please.
I'm David Yamego. I'm currently a graduate research assistant at Villanova University, and currently my work focuses on how climate change is impacting groundwater resources in southern Madagascar and what is the impact on food security. So I have a question for Ami, or maybe if you want, I can ask the question in French, since he's speaking French. Vous préférez que la question soit en français? Ça serait mieux? OK. Tout de suite, vous avez parlé d'un ensemble d'informations ou de données que vous collectez. Parce que la dame qui vient de passer a parlé d'une chose assez importante, le partage de données. Moi, je travaille beaucoup dans le sud de Madagascar actuellement. Et dans le sud de Madagascar, quand tu peux voir, il y a des milliers d'organisations. Quand tu vas dans le sud de Madagascar, il y a des milliers d'organisations. Mais le sud de Madagascar, c'est le coin ou l'endroit qui souffre le plus des effets du changement climatique. Et ça fait des années que ces gens sont là-bas et on remarque qu'il n'y a pas de changement. Donc maintenant, ma question pour vous, c'est de savoir comment vous êtes en relation avec ces derniers et aussi de savoir en matière de partage de données, comment vous arrivez à discuter avec ces derniers pour ne pas répéter la même chose au sens où vous pouvez travailler ensemble et coordonner ensemble. Et aussi savoir où sont vos données, comment nous pouvons avoir accès à vos données. Merci.
Thank you, David, for the question. For the benefit of others, if you could just very quickly translate that question for everyone in one sentence.
Okay, in one sentence, I was just telling him that in southern Madagascar, we have 1,000 of NGOs there working there, but we still don't know what is the problem, but it's still chaotic there. So I was telling him that what is his relationship with the other NGOs? How can they work together in terms of sharing data, in terms of sharing knowledge, and also at the same time, where can we find their data? Because they are collecting some data that maybe I need, so where can I find them?
Thank you, David. And while Amir is thinking, we'll take on another 1 or 2 more questions. If you can just stand there for other questions from the crowd. Any feedback, comments? Yes, we do have a question here.
Thank you. I am Muna from Sudan, University of Khartoum. I just want to ask the professor about food energy nexus. How do they address energy and food and water at the same time? The other question is about policy, water management. When you have transboundary water sharing countries, how can the other to the lady, how do they interfere in policy for making how much each country should share this water? Because we have this problem where we have this high dam at Ethiopia. You are in Sudan, so they are constructing this high dam and controlling water coming to Sudan.
Those are very good questions. And so what I would do now is turn to Amir for the question from David. Professor Nishant, if you would like to take on the question on food, water, and maybe energy nexus. And then I would also turn to Emily. Maybe you could speak from the experience if there's any transboundary or regional initiatives that USAID has, and if you have any thoughts on transboundary water resource management. So. Please.
D'accord. Pour répondre à ta question, personnellement, par AICA, je suis dans le sud où je mène plusieurs projets. Par exemple, AppFund. AppFund, nous, c'est des projets qui viennent des populations locales qu'on essaie de trouver des bailleurs pour financer ces projets-là.
And to answer your question, I'm in Ica. It's in the south of Madagascar, and we work with local populations, with local community on the water matters.
AICA, c'est, comme je le disais, une alliance qui regroupe les jeunes de Madagascar. On est sur les 24 régions, on est plus de 50 000 jeunes. Ce qui fait qu'on est au plus proche des populations locales et des réalités qui peuvent nous partager avec nous. Je vais essayer de traduire d'abord avant de continuer.
ICA, it's an alliance which encompasses 50,000 young people, and they are very, very close to local communities, and we are very close to their preoccupations.
Et je suis totalement d'accord avec toi quand tu dis qu'il y a plusieurs organisations dans le Sud et rien ne change. D'où, quand j'ai parlé tout à l'heure dans mon discours, d'un système de suivi de ces gens-là, qu'est-ce qu'ils font vraiment et pourquoi ça ne change pas. Je pense qu'il devrait y avoir un organisme indépendant, soit des jeunes, soit des associations de la société civile, soit des associations qui sont en contact avec les populations locales et en contact avec ces organisations-là pour voir pourquoi ça ne change pas.
I agree with you. We have a lot of organization of that type in south of our country, and I think we need a sort of a following up of what is happening. System of monitoring, for example, an independent organization which will be in contact with local population and which also will be aware of their needs and which will be asking the questions why it doesn't work.
Et pour finir, à ICA, on a une feuille de route qui est partie de la consultation nationale à la LCOI, la localité COI, qu'on a fait à Madagascar cette année. Et on a ramené ces messages de ces populations-là jusqu'à la COP, essayant de les faire plaidoyer ici. Et si tu t'approches de moi tout à l'heure, on pourra échanger nos contacts et je pourrai t'envoyer cette feuille de route et toutes ces données que vous voulez. Merci. Le site web est encore en maintenance, mais il serait là. Merci.
So to finish, ICA had a roadmap in Madagascar, and we try to bring up all our ideas here at COP28, and we also will have SIT website which will function very soon, and we can exchange our contacts just after the meeting.
Thank you. I will now turn to Professor Nishant for your response on the food, water, energy nexus.
Thank you. I think that's an interesting question. The reason is water availability in general in most of the countries are seasonal. At a certain time of the year, you have huge flow, and another time of year, you have a low flow. Only way it can be solved if you have reservoirs, collect the excess monsoon flow behind the dam and release it at the lean period. But in the process, you produce electricity. Many countries have dams originally to produce electricity, but water management is a byproduct, irrigation is a byproduct, flood management is a major other way benefit. Problem is, when a river crosses 2 or more countries, it becomes transboundary water, and there is no global formula by which you can meet the demand of both upper riparian and lower riparian. And if you are in the middle of it, like Sudan, you are between Ethiopia and Egypt. So Egypt has one, I should not be talking about Egypt or Sudan, but though I'm familiar with it. When your Renaissance Dam was completed, Sudan definitely got immediate benefit from flood. But same case with Bangladesh. We have 92% of the water that flows through Bangladesh comes from upper countries. India, Nepal, Bhutan, and a tiny bit from China, a small amount. So we are having dialogues continuously. Some problems have been solved a little bit on the Ganges. Some problems are solution has been agreed upon but is not politically clinched because of their internal politics. If you look onto the legal side, in 1997, UN Convention on non-navigational of uses of international water courses, that was agreed. But unfortunately, there's a very poor agreement because it doesn't have the institutional mechanism by which the provisions of the law would be applied and somebody would monitor and help all the parties to come together. So a better solution is with the ECE Convention 1992. This was for European countries where they can solve the problem not only of the river but also of lake. The lake is shared between a number of countries. But somehow they do not have the legal mandate to come to solve a dispute, but they do help the countries to come to a common understanding. So my point being, coming from a lower riparian and where we have more than 70 or 80 separate rivers with India and Bangladesh, and 5 or 6 are very big, the Ganges and the Brahmaputra. The only way, if the political masters have intention to solve, like South Africa has solved problem with Botswana and Mozambique, and whether it is to satisfaction of all co-riparians, I do not know. But at least the South African Nelson Mandela took a strong step to manage the dispute. But unfortunately, upper riparian always have an upper hand, and somehow they do not try to solve. But Sudan, you are being in the middle, and your main worry is what would happen in a drought year. Then Ethiopia would capture all the water, and I would say, ethically, Ethiopia should share the electricity with you because it's a common resource. We can talk later, but this is a peculiar problem. And I said, one of the reasons why climate change or in the COP, water is not touched is because of the transboundary water issue. Still, it was in SDG 6.5, I think. And when in 2012, we tried to have a major resolution on transboundary water issues, upper riparian and lower riparian should cooperate together, we failed. I'm not going to explain why we failed, but some of the countries have very strong position on this. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and of course it ties in very closely with the COP28 presidency theme for today, around peace, relief as well, water being a course for leading peace efforts through transboundary cooperation rather than an issue for future conflicts. So Emily, turning over to you very quickly in terms of the transboundary nexus. And then we have one more question.
Thank you. So one of the things that I didn't mention in my previous comments was that one of the areas that USAID supports is specifically looking at addressing water tenure and water security. And this is, of course, in a contentious area to work in and very challenging to be able to develop guidelines and policy measures to be able to ensure water security and address water tenure. But working collaboratively with in Africa in particular, with our regional economic communities, in trying to establish processes across boundaries that allow us to manage the water through a transboundary effort, and implementing policies, consistent policies across countries that support the cross-boundary management system. So as mentioned, it is a very difficult area to address and requires international cooperation, but one of the key areas that we do need to address in order to be able to respond to our water management and our climate impacts to our water resources. And again, one of what USAID has been trying to do is build capacity, build institutional infrastructure to be able to develop policy measures, to utilize evidence-based policy, to implement evidence-based policy interventions, and to be able to work collaboratively across partners, different stakeholders within each of the governments and with each of the regional institutions to be able to implement those policy measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, for the response. We have one more question, so I would allow for one more question, and then we'll try and wrap up the session. If you can also introduce yourself, please.
Sure, sure. I actually was directly responding to the Ethiopian problem. My name is Sebastian Brenners. I run an NGO in Ethiopia since 40 years, which heavily working on, probably know each other anyway, not me personally, but the NGO. And among others, we do watershed management. And I fully agree that this water thing has to be managed in a regional way. You know, Ethiopia has about 5 watersheds, which all go into Kenya, Sudan, South Sudan, and Somali. The problem being, though, that as of today, more than 90% of the water coming down in Ethiopia is still leaving Ethiopia. So their view in the moment is, I'm not speaking for the government, their view is we need to make more of the harness the water we have before it leaves the country, more irrigation. But obviously they also suffer because the derogation of the land pulls down the water resources. So that's why the Green Legacy program of the president is trying to regenerate the nature, to capture the water, then there's more water available to share. But I think it needs this ground. What we do now, after 40 years of installing 2,700 water points, we now started building a system, remote managing the groundwater level coming back to the database question. As of today, nobody really knows how the water problem is in Ethiopia because they don't have a model for any groundwater management. So they don't know how fast it's going to deplete. Where is the next drought coming? So I think we need to invest heavily into data management, and that's why we started a pilot to scale out now, which would help also Sudan to make more predictions in terms of droughts and water management. So that's why I think I fully agree, but it needs not only on the presidential level, but maybe on the NGO level to work up with common solutions that we can present as a whole Horn of Africa solution.
No, thank you for that. And of course, data sharing being a key enabler for partnerships, catalyzing these transboundary partnerships. Colleagues, friends, and those who are also viewing this online, it is, of course, my pleasure to moderate this. What I would now do is turn back to my panel and ask them in 1 or 2 sentences, basically, let's just say, you know, how, it's in summarizing your intervention over here, if you can just say how, or what needs to be done in terms of supporting communities to better integrate water and also integrate water into plans, but also implement these plans. So crisp 1 to 2 sentences. We'll start with Professor Nishant, of course.
Somebody said many, many years ago, maybe in UN conference, most probably in Rio, that if there is a major war, there would be about water. Now, that could be said as a metaphor or symbolically, but the lower riparian country do have very strong feeling that this should be managed regionally. And I believe in my region, in South Asia, there's enough water to meet the demand of all the riparian countries. What is missing is the institutional mechanism by which we achieve collaboration. India, Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, India, Bangladesh, Bhutan. So all kind of things are possible. And I hope the climate change people of this platform of this fora should talk about transboundary water issues. I forgot about 8 to 10 years back under UNFCCC, an international meeting was held in Mexico. You can find that report in if you go through them. That was an excellent report, how the problems of water management between the upper and lower, between the low flow and high flow, between climatic variability like drought and no rainfall period over a long time, that can be resolved. So we have the knowledge, we have the general understanding, but what is missing is the political will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Off. There we go. Thank you. Coming back to the critical aspect of working with communities, water is cross-sectoral, and so therefore we need to make sure we engage all stakeholders and I'll just wait because I can't speak when listen to someone talk on the phone at the same time. All right, so coming back to what's critical is working across sectors and engaging all stakeholders. So as we're aware, there's demand across different stakeholders for utilization of water, and it's critical that not only do we need partnerships at the high level, at the political or the government level, but we need partnerships at the community level, working in the case of smallholder farmers and their needs, working with local communities in regards to access to water for their needs beyond the agriculture sector, and then working with the stakeholders that at a larger scale, be it private sector stakeholders or large businesses or that utilize water for other purposes. So again, coming back to engagement and collaboration is critical.
Thank you.
Pour moi, ça va être de manière très simple. Je vais dire que l'eau est une ressource, mais l'eau est la vie. Il est temps maintenant d'investir dans la vie et que j'espère que pour cette COP28, ça sera un pas, un grand pas vers ces financements, vers un pourparler dans tous les niveaux du secteur pour qu'on trouve une solution pour l'eau. Merci.
For me, it's an easy answer. Water, it's a resource, and water, it's at the same time, it's alive, and it's a time to stay alive, to make a big step to find resources at this COP28. Thank you.
Thank you, dear panelists. I'll try and sum this into 4 key areas, or four key messages that I've heard to scale up efforts in terms of implementing NDCs and NEP priorities on water. What I heard was that we need to provide evidence in terms of data that could also be shared across countries. What I also heard was there's a key in terms of developing really good concrete strategies at community level, drought tolerant, flood tolerant, but also new varieties of crops for future climate scenarios. At the same time, what I heard from World Bank and also from USAID was also around designing, but also upraising really good programs in partnership with stakeholders that encourage larger action, but also investment, particularly that from private sector. And then from a youth delegate, the importance for supporting multi-stakeholder dialogue, but also adding to that around mobilizing movements, particularly youths, women groups, and children. And I think these are really good ingredients in terms of moving from planning for water within NDCs and NEPs, but also implementing this, financing this, so that it contributes towards the achievement of the SDG targets. With this, I would like to bring this panel to a close. Thank all my panelists, and a round of applause for Professor Nishad, for Valerie, Emily, and Amir. Thank you so much on behalf of the organizers.